Welcome back to KCDC. We have breaking news tonight surrounding Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. The New Yorker has published a piece claiming new sexual misconduct allegations against him during his college days at Yale. The woman at the center of the story, Deborah Ramirez. She's 53 and went to school with Kavanaugh. Her claims date back to the 1983-84 academic year when Kavanaugh was a freshman at Yale. At least 4 Senate Democrats have received information about the allegations, and at least 2 have started to investigate. In a statement, Kavanaugh wrote to the New Yorker, quote, "This alleged event from 35 years ago did not happen. The people who knew me then know that this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple. I look forward to testifying Thursday about the truth and defending my good name." The White House issued a statement in response to the allegations in the New Yorker. They say, quote, "This 35-year-old uncorroborated claim is the latest in a coordinated smear campaign by the Democrats designed to tear down a good man." With me to discuss all of this, Princeton University professor and MSNBC contributor Eddie Glaude Jr. And with me on set, MSNBC contributor and politics reporter at the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff. We also have a politics editor at the Daily Beast and also an MSNBC contributor, Sam Stein. The former chief nominations counsel to the U.S. Senate Committee on the Judiciary, Greg Nunziata. In our D.C. bureau, we have NBC News Capitol Hill reporter Leanne Caldwell. National political correspondent Steve Kornacki is in New York. And White House correspondent Kristen Welker joins me by phone. We really have an all-star team here. It's all hands on deck as we cover this unfolding story. And I want to start with Kristen Welker, who is on the phone, our White House correspondent. Kristen, I'm told you have new information from the White House about how this is going to be handled.
Well, that's right. We see a White House that is increasingly digging in. Casey, I think we got that sense from the statements that you read from Brett Kavanaugh and from the White House spokesperson. But my colleague Peter Alexander spoke with a source who is familiar with the confirmation process, who says that President Trump had 2 conversations today about these latest allegations against Judge Brett Kavanaugh before it became public, and that he expressed no change in his views. And this, I think, aligns with what we've seen from the president in recent days. You and I spent a lot of time, Casey, talking about the fact that the president has been very on message, very disciplined last week in talking about the initial allegations from Christine Blasey Ford, saying, I want to hear from her. But his tone started to change toward the end of the week. He became increasingly combative, and then we had that stunning tweet on Friday in which he effectively seemed to accuse her of not telling the truth. And so this is a president who is no stranger to digging in. This is how he tends to deal with these types of allegations. He, of course, himself has faced allegations of sexual misconduct by more than 20 women. This surfaced during the campaign. He denies all of the allegations. He fought back. He, of course, won. The White House would make the argument that those allegations were answered by the American public in the election. But look, he has fought back against others in his orbit who are facing similar allegations, whether it be Rob Porter or, other candidates who are facing allegations of misconduct. So this is a president who's no stranger to fighting back, but, and this is a big but, there's no indication he's wavering right now. Will that change? There was a moment last week, Casey, when he was on the White House South Lawn, when he seemed to indicate, look, if we hear from if we hear from Dr. Ford and she has very credible things to say, perhaps he would leave the door open to changing his mind about Judge Kavanaugh. So this continues to be an evolving story. I would just say that obviously lawmakers on Capitol Hill watching very closely, including swing voters like Susan Collins. How is she going to respond to this? That's going to be critical moving forward, Casey.
Yeah, and Leanne Caldwell, I want to bring you in on that because you and I are obviously running around chasing these lawmakers on Capitol Hill day in and day out. And I know you've also been doing a lot of the reporting on this allegation. So for anyone who's just joining us, let's walk through what this new, what Debbie Ramirez has come forward in the New Yorker and in our reporting to say about what happened with Judge Kavanaugh. And then, of course, your take on exactly how this is going to impact the process.
Sure, Casey. So what we know is a woman, Debbie Ramirez, she now lives in Boulder, Colorado. She went to Yale undergrad with Brett Kavanaugh during the same years, 1983 to 1987. As far as NBC News' reporting is concerned, we learned from several sources that during those college years, Kavanaugh had pulled down his pants and exposed himself to Ramirez. We reached out to Ramirez over the weekend. It was actually yesterday morning, and she directed me to her lawyer immediately. We haven't heard from her lawyer yet, but the New Yorker has these details nailed down. They go further to say that it was at a party they had been drinking, and his pants were down, and he thrust himself into her face, forcing her to touch his penis. And she said that when he was pulling up his pants, she remembers his laugh, and she felt ashamed and embarrassed. And she remembers someone running down the hallway saying, "Oh my goodness, Brett Kavanaugh just did this." And so she remembers the name clearly, Ramirez says. You know, Ramirez, as far as the fallout is concerned, let's go there right now. I'm reaching out to sources, especially Republican sources on Capitol Hill right now, not hearing a lot yet. As far as Susan Collins is concerned, we have not heard from her office yet. So we might any moment, she might just be hearing this news. But from a couple of the Republicans that I have talked to so far, these are the Republicans who wanted Kavanaugh confirmed, who were reluctant to move forward with the hearing of the first woman who had these allegations, Dr. Ford. Yeah. And they were saying, look, this isn't going to change our mind. We're still sticking with Kavanaugh. The timing is very suspicious. We would like to move forward with his confirmation. Casey.
Sam Stein, to that point, what are the political consequences for, in the face of these additional allegations? There are definitely going to be Republicans who are going to say push forward regardless.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, or not funny, I guess. Nothing's very funny about this. But about a week ago, you know, when the first allegation surfaced with Dr. Ford, you know, instinctually, the question I want to know is why not just scrap the nomination and start over with someone who didn't have the baggage, try to plow through before the election, if not, just do it in the midterm. It seemed like such a simple, easier lift. Why go through this whole process and risk the embarrassment? And talking to people in the White House and on the Hill, there was two reasons, basically. One was that it was incredibly off-brand for Donald Trump to back down from a political fight, right?
Especially one of this nature.
He couldn't stomach the possibility that he would back down from something like this. And the second one was the thing that holds the party together, from the Trumpites to the establishment types, is judicial nominees. And this was what you needed to do in order to keep the base satisfied prior to the midterm elections. And so for those two very reasons, they were going to have to stick with Brett Kavanaugh. I don't know if this changes any of that calculus because they are still the same factors, right? You cannot back down when your enemies are calling you out if you think it's a smear campaign. And the judicial network on the conservative side has invested so much into this enterprise that they don't want to be seen as suffering a major defeat.
Can we talk through Mitch McConnell's thinking, Greg, on that point? Because he has essentially made it his life's work to shape the judiciary. And if you play this process out, if Kavanaugh were to withdraw, they couldn't get somebody on the bench before the midterm elections. If control of the Senate shifted, then all of a sudden you're facing potentially a very difficult situation. And we should not lose sight of the fact that this is an appointment that could change the court for a generation because it was Anthony Kennedy's spot. But, I mean, if you're the people thinking through what is going on with this process right now, and you're Mitch McConnell, what do you do?
Well, I mean, I think you really have to start with the allegations and really consider them and see how serious you think they are. This all arises, of course, in the context of this fight over that critical middle seat on the Supreme Court. So I think Republicans and Mitch McConnell know that virtually every Democrat was going to oppose whoever this president nominated, and virtually every outside group was going to oppose, on the left, was going to oppose whoever this president.
Although there were a few that might have voted yes before all of this unfolded.
A couple of Democrats, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. But I think there's, again, a sense over the last several weeks that there was a lot of unfairness towards Brett Kavanaugh. I thought that the eagerness with which Democrats on committee accused him of committing perjury on really thinly sliced distinctions between his testimony was unprecedented in a Supreme Court confirmation. Of course, the effort to interrupt and stop the process from even starting. So I think you have to view it in the context of all of that. That said, if these allegations become seem verifiable, if Dr. Ford seems believable, if Mrs. Ramirez seems believable, it will become a very different question.
Yeah. Speaking of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he was speaking at the Values Voters Summit on Friday and had high praise for Brett Kavanaugh and assured the crowd that he will be on the Supreme Court.
You're all following the current Supreme Court fight. And you will watch it unfold in the course of the next week. President Trump has nominated a stunningly successful individual. You've watched the fight, you've watched the tactics, but here's what I want to tell you. In the very near future, Judge Kavanaugh will be on the United States Supreme Court.
But back in July, the New York Times reported that according to Republican officials, Senator McConnell had been pushing for two other nominees, reportedly telling the president Judges Raymond Kethledge and Thomas Hardiman presented the fewest obvious obstacles to being confirmed to replace Justice Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court. And the lengthy paper trail of another top contender, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, would pose difficulties for his confirmation. And Betsy, this fight is playing out, we shouldn't forget, with a constituency that is perhaps behind the cameras, but should not necessarily be overlooked, which is the people that are advocating for these other people who wanted this seat and who are perhaps not so subtly nudging the White House and saying, hey guys, we're still available if you decide you want to bail on that guy over there.
That's certainly true. I haven't yet communicated with a Republican close to the confirmation process tonight who's told me that he or she thinks that Kavanaugh's done. And I've communicated with a handful who've said they're somewhere in the confident space that he can still get through this. Of course, there were plenty of Republicans who raised concerns about Kavanaugh, from people in sort of the Breitbart, more far-right anti-immigration space, to folks who parsed some of the comments that he'd made about abortion issues and assessed that he wasn't conservative enough on that question. Without a doubt, Kavanaugh had his detractors, but speaking quite broadly, he, generally speaking, had overwhelming support from Republicans, or at least was viewed from Republicans as totally acceptable.
And I actually just spoke to Senator Lindsey Graham, who said that the timing of this is very suspicious, and that you have to prove to me that he's not the guy he says he is. And Sam Stein, that sort of is, or Greg, go ahead. That's sort of the thing that sticks with me, that this is really going to be a contest of character. Yeah. It's a character battle more than.
And it's not just the guy he says he is. It's also the guy that many people in Washington believe him to be. He's a judge currently sitting in D.C. He served in the Bush administration. Many of these senators know him personally and have known him for years, him and his wife, and believe him to be a good person. And when you see someone who you believe to be a good person, incapable of this, accused of these things, I don't think you lightly pull that nomination. You want to defend him. And the New Yorker story says that they were unable to confirm with any other attendee at the party that Brett Kavanaugh was there. So unless there's more meat on this, I think a lot of Republicans are going to be inclined to continue defending him.
Yeah, you have to have the presumption of innocence, obviously. That's critical. I mean, it's what the foundation of our judicial system. But Lindsey Graham, I think, reflects a different outlook here, which is, he was on the shows this morning. He said there was nothing that Dr. Ford could say that would make me change my vote. And that is the commitment that I think Senate Republicans have to this nomination. And to me, at least, it is a bit befuddling, because there are other nominees who are very good conservative jurists who would probably have a lot easier time at this juncture getting through the Senate. And I've tried to figure out what it is about Brett Kavanaugh that people are so committed to, and I'm still trying to.
I think the sense is just simply the fact that what Betsy was talking about, and others, that they just want to dig in on this. And Steve Kornacki, to that point, I'm interested in your take on the politics of this, the digging in. And you had looked at back in 1991 when not only was Clarence Thomas accused of these things by Anita Hill, but then he was confirmed after the fact. What's the political danger for Republicans here in proceeding with this? Simply, we are not talking about a criminal prosecution. That is not the bar. This is a lifetime appointment to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, just in terms of the politics, you have to figure out who are the swing votes, who are the senators, where the balance of power sort of lies, and what are the politics, what are their political considerations. If you go back to 1991, the swing votes that got Clarence Thomas confirmed, they were Democrats. They were Democrats from the South, white Democrats from the South, who looked at polls after the Hill-Thomas hearings, and they were startled to see something they didn't expect, and that was that support for Clarence Thomas among African-American voters surged after the Hill-Thomas hearings. He had higher support among black voters than he did among white voters. And so Democrats, particularly those who were up in 1992, a year later, looked at that and they said, a major part of my constituency, voters I'm going to be relying on to get reelected, are for this nomination. Therefore, I can't be against this nomination. Those were the key votes, Democratic votes, that actually got Clarence Thomas confirmed in 1992. So now where are we 27 years later, where are we? We know where it is, the swing votes. We've known all along. Look, on the Democratic side, if anybody's going to be peeled off to vote for this, it's the red state Democrats, the Trump state Democrats like Manchin, like Donnelly in Indiana. The calculation for them, we showed the poll earlier, if it's 34-38 nationally, 34 support, 38 nationally, then in a place like West Virginia, a place like Indiana, that support number is probably a lot higher. So unless those numbers move significantly more in the opposition direction, I think still if you're Manchin, still if you're Donnelly, that calculation holds. The question then on the other side then is the Republicans. It's Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, maybe, you could talk about the calculations of somebody like Flake or Corker who aren't going to be there, who sort of, is that introduced sort of a wild card possibility. But the politics are, it's sort of where we've known them all along. I kind of agree with what seems to be the consensus emerging on your panel. There are a lot of Republicans. It seems absent something that's it rises to the level of, I guess, smoking gun. I think that the vast majority of Republicans have probably an instinct to stick it out. The question is on the edges there. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, maybe one or two others.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say for those red state Democrats you mentioned, Donnelly, Manchin, and others, I think they certainly have been running away from me in the hallways over the last week, but I have had a chance to have some private conversations with those who are familiar with their thinking, and I don't think we're going to hear from any of them until we hear from Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. But Eddie Glaude, can I get you to weigh in on what Steve was just talking about with the Clarence Thomas hearings and kind of the way the senators thought through their African-American constituencies, how that impacted what happened with her, and obviously the situation in this case is different.
Well, I mean, what's interesting about the 1991 hearing is that there was a gender split within the African American community. We often forget that 1,600 African American women took out a full-page ad in the New York Times stating their support for Anita Hill, and what the effect it had in African American communities in terms of the breakdown, in terms of the sexism of black men, how the activism of black women, and what we do know, at least African American women across the country in our current political moment are in some ways the most active among the Democratic base, and so I think that's a complicated question. I'm also interested in just something that I want to shift to something else too really quickly, Casey.
Sure.
I'm interested in evangelicals and how they're responding to this. So I know they're part of the Republican base, and this Faustian bargain in terms of their kind of their support for Kavanaugh. But here we have a second case. It seems to me, and this takes me to the third point, that we have to pump the brakes. We've been on this accelerated kind of calendar, and folks have questioned.
On that second point. Yes. I mean, those evangelical voters that you reference, I mean, they seem to have been willing to look past President Trump's own indiscretions or alleged indiscretions precisely for this, because they wanted a judge like Judge Kavanaugh.
Right, and it seems to me, Casey, it shows how morally bankrupt they are. Think about what Franklin Graham said about the situation with Dr. Ford. Think about what they're turning a blind eye to. It seems to me that it suggests at least that they've sold their souls for a mess of pottage, but maybe that's just me. I'm just confused.
Well, I think we all are certainly trying to wrap our heads around everything that we've learned new tonight. And I actually, before we wrap up here, Leanne, I want to go back to you just for final thoughts. I know we're sort of watching the reporting trickle in. There are now Democratic groups that are outright calling for Kavanaugh to withdraw. They, of course, have been opposing him all the way along, but seems to be digging in.
That's absolutely right. This is another thing that gives them fuel to their fire. They didn't support Kavanaugh to begin with, as you mentioned, and they are going to use this as another reason why he should not be confirmed. But you know what? It's not the Democrats that really matter here, as we all know. It's the Republicans, as Kavanaugh can be confirmed with the support of just 51 Republicans. And there's a couple who did express concern after the first allegation came forward. And, you know, those really are the four that we're going to continue to be watching. Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins, Jeff Flake, and potentially Bob Corker as well. And Jeff Flake is on the Judiciary Committee, and so he is the first obstacle that Kavanaugh and Republicans who want Kavanaugh confirmed need to get past. Casey.
Yeah. Leanne Caldwell, thank you for your reporting. Thanks for running in to help us out and offer all that tonight. Give us a call back if you get anything more. We'd be happy to get your reporting on the air. So we should note there was supposed to be a special airing right now on MSNBC. Headliners, Paul Manafort. It is going to air tonight. It's just going to be at 10 o'clock p.m. after we wrap up our breaking news coverage, because we do have a lot more coming on this breaking news. A second woman accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct. This just days before Thursday's Judiciary Committee hearing. Stay with us.
It's a brand given life by craftsmen, not machines. With seductive Italian style built for experiences, not showrooms. The Alfa Romeo Giulia, Motor Trend's 2018 Car of the Year. And introducing Stelvio and 4C Alfa Romeo, the perfect balance of engineering and emotion.
Need a change of scenery? Kayak compares hundreds of travel and airline sites, so you can be confident you're getting the right flight at the best price. Cheers. Kayak. Search one and done.
Turn on Smart Relief, and it turns off pain. But turn off Smart Relief, the relief keeps going. I see how Smart Relief keeps on working even after you take it off, because it boosts the release of endorphins, relieving pain for hours. Smart Relief. Turn off pain.
When nighttime nasal congestion closes in, Breathe Right strips are designed to simply open your nose right back up. Breathe better, sleep better. Breathe Right.
This is whiskey, Johnny Walker's Scotch whiskey, from this place and these people, aye, Scotch makers, creating the bold and complex flavour of Johnny Walker Black Label. Step right up.
Computer, order pizza.
Of course, Daniel.
Fridge, weather.
Clear skies in 75.
Trash can, turn on the TV.
My pleasure.
Ice dispenser, find me a dog sitter.
Okay.
And make ice.
Pizza delivered.
What's happened to my son?
I think that's just what people are like now. I mean, with Progressive, you can quote your insurance on just about any device, even on social media. They'll be fine.
Willie?
I don't know.
Tammy here just got the Ring alarm. Professionally monitored security for just $10 a month. Now she has to break it to her old home security company.
Hey, Tammy.
Hi, Frank.
You wanted to talk to me?
Yeah, it's over.
What?
Yeah, I'm just tired of the contracts and the fine print.
Service fees.
Right, service fees.
Oh, who's going to protect your house? Ring? Break free from home security contracts with the new Ring alarm. Learn more at ring.com.
I want to thank you all for spending the past 5 days with me. Having you meet my friends and family was so important. I can really envision each of you in my life, but at this time, I can only pick one. Haskell, will you take my prescription? I think that's a yes! Find your perfect pair by trying 5 frames for free at warbyparker.com.
I ask each nominee 2 questions. First question for you. Since you became a legal adult, have
Have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
So Eddie Glaude Jr., I just want to take a second to talk about that sort of exchange right there. And Mazie Hirono asks that of all of the judicial nominees that she has a chance to. She says she's done it for across the board, men and women, as according to what she said this morning. Now, obviously, it was not necessarily relevant in the case of Dr. Ford because that allegedly took place when they were both in high school, before Judge Kavanaugh had turned 18 years old. This allegation of misconduct is different.
Indeed, I think Sam made the point earlier in the show that this would rise to the level of at least a serious consideration, but not he perjured himself. But part of what I've been saying all night is that we at least need to slow down, take seriously these claims, resist the arbitrary nature of the deadlines that the Republican Party has set, that the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee have set, so that we can actually assess all of this in a serious and nuanced and careful way. These are serious allegations, and we need to, and the process needs to reflect that. And so the question that the senator asked Judge Kavanaugh opens the door for a series of questions around a pattern of behavior, a pattern of behavior that we ought to at least corroborate or at least suggest that didn't happen or whatever. However, we need to just simply investigate it so that we can see whether or not this man has the character and is fit to sit on the highest court in the land. That seems to me just basic, no matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. That's just simply basic to me.
Well, I think it is already, Eddie, breaking down along party lines. We actually have this just in, and I'm going to read here from my iPad. Dianne Feinstein, the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, has called for the postponement of any further hearings on Judge Kavanaugh. So this presumably covers the Thursday hearing that we had just learned today was set for Thursday at 10 a.m. She writes, quote, "I'm ready to request an immediate postponement of any further proceedings related to the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. I also ask that the newest allegations of sexual misconduct be referred to the FBI for investigation and that you join our request for the White House to direct the FBI to investigate the allegations of Christine Blasey Ford as well as these new claims." And Greg, I'm going to go to you on this because you have a pretty nuanced understanding of how this all unfolds and works. You were talking about this FBI process before, but if you're Chuck Grassley, how do you respond to this after all of this back and forth about when this hearing was going to be Thursday?
Yeah, I mean, well, for starters, if you're Chuck Grassley, I think you're pretty frustrated with Dianne Feinstein for having sat on this letter from Dr. Ford for a couple of months and having just generally been obstructive in this process. So I don't think he has a lot of patience for her right now. I think he feels like they had previously had a very collegial relationship. I think a lot of damage has been done to that. As everything Supreme Court battles touch gets kind of damaged and dirty these days. But Chuck Grassley takes whistleblowers seriously. He's known for always hiring good investigators in the Senate. I mean, he's going to want to get to the bottom of this to the best of his ability. I think he will likely believe that his investigators can do that more quickly and more efficiently than the FBI.
Right. Sam Stein, you have breaking news.
Yeah, so this is clearly a really evolving situation. Earlier tonight, Chuck Grassley's office released the letter that Dr. Christine Ford sent to Dianne Feinstein that prompted all this. Source familiar now tells me that a second letter has been sent from
Betsy,
Dr. Ford to Chairman Grassley's office yesterday, and that Dr. Ford's team has consented for the Grassley office to release the letter. It has not been made public yet. I just got source telling me that we can
report the existence of the letter. And Betsy, this jives with the reporting you've been doing?
That's correct. I can say that that's true. Unfortunately, I don't have any information that I can share at this point about the contents of the letter. Okay. But the context for this is that there could potentially be either new context from people in Dr. Ford's camp or new perspective that will inform the way we're talking about these allegations.
So the sense from your sources is that this letter would bolster Dr. Ford's case?
The letter is from Dr. Ford's camp. Okay. So presumably we can surmise.
Okay. So Sam Stein, I mean, how does this, I mean, what can we expect to start hearing from Republicans on this? If there is, in fact, a building case from Dr. Ford, plus these additional allegations, plus we haven't even dug into Michael Avenatti, who is tweeting about, and we should remember that NBC has certainly not confirmed this, we are kind of working on this, but he claims to have a third woman with allegations.
Okay, I think, put aside the Avenatti stuff, because none of that is confirmed. I think what's interesting about this is that literally the conversation we're having now can change diametrically if Jeff Flake, a member of the Judiciary Committee, comes out tomorrow and says, I can't vote yes until we do an FBI probe, or I can't vote yes until we do X, Y, or Z. He has that power, because they have a very thin majority on the Judiciary Committee. If he does not vote for the nomination to send it through to the Senate floor, it's effectively dead, right? I mean, I guess they could get too far. Humiliated to a degree. That
that happened in the Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, there's a long tradition in Thomas and Bork where they can vote no. They only do this for the Supreme Court, not for other judgeships. Sure. But they could vote negative in committee and then still report them to the full Senate. But Republicans don't have a lot of votes.
Fine.
To
the degree that I'm saying, if Susan Collins were to come out and Lisa Murkowski come out tomorrow and say, listen, this is just too much. Suddenly, every protestation that Lindsey Graham has, that Mitch McConnell has, that anyone on Twitter has, doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter anymore. So we're dealing, this is a huge, vast universe of opinions that are flowing in here. It's a very pointed political battle, but I'm struck at how narrow the deciding people are here. We're talking about 4 people who basically can say, you know what, enough's enough, and that's it. That's it.
It's a very, very small audience. Eddie Glaude Jr., you've already stayed for so much longer than I know you probably plan to on a Sunday night. So I just want to give you a chance to thank you for sticking around. And what are your final thoughts here heading into the week? We're all going to get up tomorrow morning and jump back into a whirlwind that is probably going to be more intense even than it was last week, which a lot of us, I think it was Sungmin Kim who tweeted what a century that week was. What do you think is the onus on Senators Collins and Murkowski this week?
Well, first of all, this is a wonderful introduction to KCDC. My goodness.
We've been trying to get you so many times. It's, it's quite a night. You chose to join us for the first time.
Look, I think we have to learn the lesson. We have to learn the real lesson of the Me Too movement. And the real lesson of the Me Too movement isn't to take down powerful men. It's really to challenge and uproot from the core, from the root, patriarchy and sexism. And so I think Senator Murkowski and Senator Collins, if they really want to challenge the way in which patriarchal power has produced the outcomes that really harm the life chances of young girls and women across the country, they need to take seriously what this moment represents. Because if we dismiss Dr. Ford and if we dismiss Deborah Ramirez, if we plow through, think about the message we're sending to all of the young girls, all of the boys, all of the people who may suffer sexual assault, that they might have to stay in the shadows for 30 years again. And we can't do that again. We can't do that.
Eddie Glaude Jr., thank you so much. Come back anytime. Possibly we will follow the script more directly next time you come back. But when we come back